You're watching Face to Face. I'm your host, Tim Vince, and I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Lisa Nolland, who I've known for probably nearly 2 decades. Yes. I remember asking you, about halfway through those 2 decades, are you still doing what you're doing? You said, is the Pope Catholic? And then we said, we had that moment where we said, maybe not. But Lisa, before we go into some of the very, very important work that you're involved in, the research and the evidence that you've uncovered over the years, just tell me a little of your Christian faith and Christian journey.
Okay.
Tell me how you came to know the Lord, and obviously, I haven't let you talk yet, but you've got an American accent, so how you came to be in the UK.
Okay. Well, I became a Christian. I prayed with my mother when I was 6 out in the garden, and we nailed a little stake in the ground, and that was my go-to whenever I was wondering about, oh dear, am I not? Yes, indeed. But probably my faith came alive starting to read C.S. Lewis in my teens, and that's where I saw how exciting and powerful good was, and how sad, tragic, boring evil really is. See, so often we have inverted those, what's bad is really exciting, but we've got to be good for goodness sake, but that's kind of boring, that's whatever. So
that's
probably C.S. Lewis.
Brilliant way to put it, because the promises of Satan are all alluring, but they're all false.
Yes.
False promises of the future and how exciting hell is.
That's right, that's right.
We don't pull any punches here, but no, so you got that as a teenager.
Yes.
Wow, that's amazing. And how did you find among your peers? So you're reading C.S. Lewis, I assume most did not.
No, that's right. And I read That Hideous Strength, I still remember when I was 17, and realized, oh dear, what are we up against? And sadly, the rest of my life has spent watching That Hideous Strength unfold.
Wow.
Tweet for 2024 now.
Yeah.
But yes.
And so in the US and now in the UK.
Oh, yes.
And so what brought you to the UK? Was it your work? Or
no, marriage.
Your marriage, oh lovely.
Yes, loyalty. Okay. My husband got a job in the UK, so I came along with him. And then I have studied history in the past, did a master's in Canada, then did another master's here in the UK. And there I found my lady, as it were, a woman named Josephine Butler. And she was very, very brave, fighting the double standard of sexual morality in the Victorian times. And so I spent about 10 years living, as it were, with Josephine. So she was alive during the reign of Victoria, the Queen Victoria. Did amazing, amazing work. And that's where I started to really get a handle on what was happening in terms of the whole pansexual revolution.
Yeah. So when people think of Victorian values, they don't think about double standards often, I would have thought.
That's right.
But of course, human nature, if you've read C.S. Lewis, is still there in every generation.
Yes, that's right.
But it seems to have been turbocharged in our lifetimes, at which we, is shocking, actually.
Basically, there are many factors in this, in my view, but the quote-unquote research of Alfred Kinsey has been one of the main drivers. And very few know how flawed his research was, what a desperately unhappy and deeply troubled man he was. And they think, wow, isn't he great, the father of the sex revolution? What could be better? And in fact, many things could be better. So part of what I've been doing since then is trying to expose all the roadkill, the damage from this, quote, pansexual revolution.
Roadkill.
Roadkill,
I know. So let me just say this, just from my sort of simplistic Christian perspective, that it's all pretty well predicted in the Garden of Eden, the false offer. of the serpents, you know, and even though God had given life, he'd given dominion, he'd given authority, they submitted to all these false promises, mimicking what God had already offered, which is you can be like God. But God said, you are like me, I've made you in my image.
That's right, that's right.
And how corrupting that is.
Counterfeits. That's what we saw in Genesis, and that's what is constantly with Alfred Kinsey. It's his counterfeit, fabulous sex. Now, he did get, in my view, one thing very right, and that was sex is fab. Now, Christians believe sex is wonderful because God himself thought up the very idea. Our bodies are totally God-made. So I think I appreciate that from Kinsey, but there's so much other very worrying
excuse
stuff.
my ignorance, because I've never really delved into the subject, but what was his time period? When was he most influential?
Okay, he was right after World War II, and many people say he dropped another atomic bomb, which was all the quote-unquote research that he rolled out in these huge volumes, which he claimed to, quote, liberate human sexuality.
But yet we had a culture that was willing to swallow it. So something happened in the psyche of our nations, I think of Britain, and somehow there was just a collective loss of confidence in the church, about the gospel, about believing in the scriptures, about believing in the origin of sin. If you get those foundations out of line, you're stuffed.
And also you have key media leaders who are promoting this agenda. Big time. See, many of the social scientists, they were saying, stop, Kinsey's research is seriously problematic, but hey ho, didn't matter. It's really the mainstream media played a huge part in my view.
And so they're already corrupted, and then they're recruiting according to another gospel, so to speak.
Yes, that's exactly
Which wasn't the gospel of John Reith, you know, the first chair of governors of the BBC, which was a very godly framework for bringing good through broadcasting, but they've just stolen it.
Yeah, that's right.
As I would say they've done, it's nothing, I'm not here to express my opinions, but I do anyway, with schools. So many church schools, many inspired giving from Christians to create education for children, all sort of handed over by this very a benign state, which has just grabbed all of these assets and is now using it for evil.
Yes, yes. I think for me, what is most concerning is the parents that still trust the system. I was a former teacher. I am a former teacher. I know many teachers actually, they are able to push back. God bless them. Other teachers are a little more unsure, but they want the best for kids. But sadly, many activists have gotten in. And they're really promoting this agenda for children and young people. And in my view, it's deeply troubling.
And it's kind of who's in charge, as it were. I mean, we know the devil's in charge, but it seems that you know, even Christian teachers and even Christian heads seem powerless to stop this onslaught. And of course, the government tends to pass laws which they don't really think through.
No.
And there are other dark actors. I don't want to be too conspiratorial, but there are dark actors who are feeding them the brief and the agenda, and they say, okay, we'll rubber stamp that, and let's run with it.
Yes, yes. And so in many ways, the Cass report is an absolute miracle.
That's Hilary Cass, and that was on the gender, you know,
transgender, and is this a healthy, happy, good, positive thing for these youngsters? And she was able to look at the research. No, the research doesn't back up what is being promoted. These children need proper therapy, proper counseling, and they're not getting it with the puberty blockers and all that. So thank God for the Cass report.
And the fact that it's, I think, a government-funded, government-commissioned report, it will help people like us who have been shut down from talking anything about this.
Yes.
Even though it's out of love and concern for the children, we're told that it's hate-filled.
Oh, totally. That's right.
So just tell us a little bit about how it feels to be, as it were, against this tide. you know, just personally, Lisa, you're basically coming up against an enormous tide that since the 50s, 60s.
Oh, totally. Well, I think for me, the hardest thing is the almost intentional ignorance, apathy, complacency. No, this would never be happening at my child's school, or my daughter is a wonderful Christian head. She would never let this sort of thing go on. And I'm just thinking, well, maybe she is, but we are hearing very, very dark tales coming forward. But there are some schools that are still fine. Thank God for that. So hey, God bless you. But increasingly, I think what is the most discouraging is the parents who fail to see, stop, they really are after your child. They are changing your child's concepts, and also social media plays a part. Pornography plays a huge part. Now there is some pushback against the push for porn, as many people are going, stop, this really is damaging.
It's really damaging.
Thank God for that. So basically my
but aren't there also parents who know what's going on, and through weakness or through lack of faith or indifference, they say, well, you know, or they assimilate and they actually adopt the narrative themselves. Yes,
that's right. Or they often think either they shrink the problem. Oh, it's just one lesson every, you know, in the spring term, summer term, whatever. Or they actually fail to realize, stop, they don't understand child development. See, you really are molding the templates of how the child looks at all this stuff. And in terms of in terms of teenagers.
Yeah. Yes, now, so age, I'd like to go into these age brackets because they say, oh, well, it's okay after a certain age, you know, but before that age, they still have to have this relationship with sex education, you know, and then it goes right down to the youngest age because the head is the one who chooses when it's age appropriate.
Correct.
But just tell us, what is a safe age to be sort of infecting a child's mind or a young person's mind with some of this? By the way, I don't believe in going into the details because we know what's going on.
Yeah.
And it's shameful to mention what the disobedient do in secret, which is a tough one to deal with. Yeah. But just tell me something about this research on age appropriateness.
Okay, well, we have very strong evidential base for the fact that let's say teenagers. So oftentimes teenagers, it's like, oh, well, they're already whatever. Well, we know that sexually active kids have far more problems across a whole range. Now, that evidence alone needs to be taught to every single child. Yeah. See, now, right now, the smart kids know if I light up, chances are I will damage my lungs because they realize their lungs are still processing. In other words, they're not adults. They're not totally formed, as it were. So I will not light up. Now, in many ways, having them or getting sexually active is far worse because one sex act gone wrong when you're 14 or 17 or whatever, that can be following you until you are 80 because you know what? That little, what you did with that boy in the park, well, guess what? He gave you a little something and you will always remember him by that. See, it can be a game changer. Sometimes it definitely is, sometimes for now, sometimes later, sometimes both, but there are huge downsides. And children, and teenagers do not know, they are not told that the downsides, the consequences. Now the other thing,
the extreme of that is puberty blockers and then literally mutilating kids because of a dysphoria.
Because of a dysphoria, and the adults who know don't want to say because they don't want to get canceled.
But I interrupted you, and you said another.
Yeah, and another thing is right. So, what kids need to know is their vulnerability. Okay, so if you are a 12 or to 17, 18-year-old, whatever, okay, your prefrontal cortex will not have developed until your mid-20s. That is the area in your brain where you weigh risks, you assess danger, you put on the brakes, you are capable of evaluating tricky scary situations. In other words, you are in charge. You're probably as good as you're going to get in terms of your being
pre that date, you're very vulnerable.
Yeah, you are. Number two, your amygdala, which is further back, that's all ready to go. In your mid-20s, they think, sorry, mid-teens, it's like foot on the gas, go for it. So sadly, you're ready to go for it, and in one way, in terms of pleasures, in terms of experience, in terms of risks, in terms of eating life, going for it. Well, that's great, but your ability
your judgment isn't
it's
developed.
not at all. Number three, female cervixes, teenage girls' cervixes are 1 cell thick. That's one reason why. So adults, 15 to 24-year-olds are 6 times as likely to have an STI as their adult self. Boys, they don't have cervixes, but they are, females are 6 times, boys are 3 times that age group likely to get an STI as their adult self.
And the stats are that there's been a massive increase.
Yeah, they just keep going up. So those are just some of the places where youngsters, and the scariest thing is, they think they're in control.
Yeah.
They think, oh good,
And that's the impaired judgment, where they think they're in control.
Yes, and no one is saying stop, don't go there, grow up first, because the risks are too great for you. So there is pushback. There's exciting programs happening in the US, also some here, but we need far more of that in my view.
And let's go back to the church now. How do we, crack that one open? Because they tend to, follow some of the most horrible activists, and they use those as the benchmark rather than, in other words, we've got to reflect society and we've got to reflect, like they do in the BBC. But actually, before they know it, they're actually energizing these campaigns.
They're damaging children and young people.
Yeah.
So for me, I very much say to parents first. So I think you start with parents, the parents in the church. Say, do you know what your child is being taught? Please. It could be that you're going to have to change your priority lists.
But isn't it damaging, Lisa, when you have the Archbishop of Canterbury endorsing a book for all church schools that sounds brilliant because it's valuing all God's children and yet encouraging cross-dressing. This is all pre-Hilary Cass, but encouraging transgenderism in their schools, in church schools.
Oh, yeah.
And then parents say, oh, well, my children's going to a lovely Church of England school. So it's a great responsibility on church leadership.
Well, okay, so essentially I'm constantly, when I listen to any leader or any parachurch organization, and I don't want to mention names because that isn't fair, but I say, what are they talking about and what will they not open their mouths about? And if they're not willing to open their mouths, you're saying what can be done. Well, one of the main things is withdrawing funding, saying, you know what, you're not doing your job. You're not protecting all children, all young people. You are missing in action and asleep at the wheel. And Jesus talks all the time about the children being so vulnerable, and yet what are we doing for our own? And that's interesting. So
by the way, I keep interrupting you, which isn't fair, but whoever causes one of these little ones to sin, I don't think the Lord was, in anything he said, was more severe in what he said towards those who cause the little ones to sin.
And so we have Bible-based preaching churches that claim to believe that, but it's like, stop, this is happening now. On your watch, or at least you need to start doing some research. So that would be another thing, encouraging church leadership. Find out, what are your own actually believing? Not what they know are the right answers, but what are they taught in school? What are your Christian teachers having to teach? So it's like, in some ways, we need to raise this agenda item to far higher on the in terms of the hierarchy of values. See, it's so low. It's like, oh, well, the kids are fine. Oh, yeah, we're going to run another whatever program. And it's pretty discouraging after a while.
They are focusing a lot on safety, aren't they? They have a lot of safety for children, and yet, philosophically, they're opening up the gates of hell on the kids.
Yes, That's exactly right.
Yeah, amazing, isn't it? So it's hard, it is tough to see all those who should be natural allies, you know, nowhere to be seen, as you say, missing in action.
Yes, and asleep at the wheel if they are. So one of the things I am encouraged by is my group and I work a lot with not yet Christians.
Okay, it's very, I love that term, by the way. Isn't that a good one? Carry on, you've said it twice, so I had to point it out.
It is because it's like, see, they will say to me, what has happened to the Christian parents? Don't they know what is happening? And they care about not only their own children, but about all children. They somehow get this, the children are vulnerable in ways that adults are not vulnerable, and we've got to protect them. And perhaps the other thing is, they're not afraid to get angry. I find so often Christians, and huge overstatement, but they're scared of becoming angry and being seen as being angry. And my not yet Christians go, don't they care? These kids are being damaged.
Yeah, so on the research, so we talked about, you know, the various, you know, the brain development. What about the research on outcomes, you know, evidence to show what's going on?
Okay, the best group I know, in fact, maybe I could give you their website. They have been, it's a philosophic school of looking at this, which is sexual risk avoidance. On the one hand, but also what kids need to know and how to engage so that when they grow, as they're growing, they are incorporating healthy sexuality, healthy boundaries, healthy relationships. See, you can't just say, no, 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 that's all wrong. You've also got to say, okay, what do these kids need? So a wonderful group, also that's in the US, it's called weascend.org, so weascend.org. They have excellent research on the damages of sexually active kids.
Yeah, so that's very, very, very helpful. Now, of course, there are plenty of organisations out there who are sort of trying to campaign for traditional values, but then you've got the other ones campaigning and maligning traditional values. And they're not just saying, look, we want to ignore it, they're saying that is really dangerous. And so that's what we're up against, is being mischaracterised, falsely accused.
Constantly. Well, how I appreciate this approach, because it is basically saying all children, for all children regardless, and all youngsters, sex is toxic. Do not go there for these excellent reasons. When you grow up, you can figure out what you want to do. But right now, you are far too vulnerable, and we need to help you protect you so you can make the most of your life. You can make wise, smart choices now, but also into the future. So I think that's one positive pushback, is we're against all sex for all kids because of its dangers and
so
risks.
Therefore you're not discriminatory because it's a universal health statement.
That's exactly right. Health and psychological, emotional, physical, in terms of educational attainments, financial well-being, and relationships in the future. See, what you do now can oftentimes lead, not always, but often lead into the future. And that's damaging for those kids, and at least they need to know, stop, I could be paying for this. But finally, there is a wonderful concept called secondary virginity. It says to youngsters, okay, you made some bad mistakes, oh dear, what were you thinking? That's fine. You learn from your mistakes, you draw a line. If you're a person of faith, you ask God to help you, but also you help others with what you've been through, but you know, stop, that was a bad move. I'm doing smart moves now. This is a far better way for me to live my life. I have a better life this way than that way. And so we really believe in the concept of secondary virginity.
Yeah, well done. That's so important to reclaim. And well, it's redemption.
Yes, it's redemption.
It's the Christian story. The other thing, just before we close, is it's not just the individual, is it? It affects. It seems to be sort of suggested that it affects the family. So the family changes their worldview, but also you know, when they then are bringing up the next generation, have we got any research on that? Because of course, if this started in the 60s,
yes,
we must have quite a lot of evidence of screwed up families, multi-generational problems.
Yes. Now, I am not up to speed on that, but that's an excellent, of course, and the whole epigenetics issue, which is how you were raised, then influences that can start to mold what you then pass on to the next generation. So yes, it's far bigger, but I think this secular apologetic of we want the best for kids, this is not the best, and the church needs to rise to the fore and start proclaiming, and this is God's best for them, but it's also humanly speaking the best.
Yeah, it's very good. I mean, my questions just come as they're quite lazy. I just go to the scriptures, and you know, basically, look, you will cause problems for the third and fourth generation if you go down this. But if you go down the route, the model that God has given you, because He created us, there can be blessing for 1,000 generations.
Yes, that's right.
And I think that, and the other scripture that comes to mind is in Deuteronomy, where it says, look, I've set before you life and death, therefore choose life so that you and your children may live.
That's right.
And I suppose another big philosophical point in the last minute is just, which I've nearly forgotten because of the time that's gone, is that, and I've completely forgotten it.
Okay,
so what would you say, you know, just in our final minutes, who are you speaking to now? The church, the not yet Christians, me?
I think I'm speaking to every adult who has either parent, grandparent, who has access into their grandchild or grandchild, whatever, to say, wake up. Do you know what is on their phone? Do you know, you assume that children self-censor. Please start getting inside their heads, start looking at life through their eyes. So I run a sex-proofing your kids seminar, but adults need to up their game. If nothing else, adults need to say, stop, we are losing our youngsters. But it's not too late. With God, it's never too late.
Isn't it great to at least, while it's still a day, as it were, you know, work. Because there's a night coming when no man, woman can work.
That's right.
Yeah. No, you're an inspiration.
Oh, well,
Pleased we first met 14 odd years ago, and you know, I'm very pleased that we've gone face to face. Look forward to following up.
I look forward to it too. Thank you.
You so much. Dr. Lisa Nolland, bless you. And thank you, all of you, for watching this, and look forward to seeing you next time we go face to face.